And it is a really important network of people across the church in almost every diocese who play their part in championing disabled people and their full inclusion within the church. And there's not been the opportunity to come together in person. The network meets monthly online, but it's not the same as being in the same place. And this is an opportunity to meet, to equip, to resource, and hopefully to re-enthuse for the task. I hope that these 2 days will send people home, first of all, re-enthused and better equipped to play their role as disability advisors, whether they are one of the very small numbers of paid advisors, or whether, as is more common, those who are doing it as on top of a job or in the spare time of their spare time. And that will mean that gradually across the church the culture of inclusion moves forward and we are more reflective of the church that we're called to be.
There's something very special about meeting regularly and having conversations, and alongside that, meeting on site so we can have those casual conversations that you wouldn't just have on Zoom. The water cooler conversations. Haven't I seen you somewhere before conversations? And can we just sit down and have a quick chat, seeing as we're in the same space? There's something I wanted to ask you, but didn't want to ask you on Zoom. So it's all those casual conversations and those relationship building opportunities. At the conference, we're going to be hearing from a number of different people. So Rachel discussing what it means to live with a stammer and be a public speaker. Bishop Sarah, Bishop of London, talking about dyslexia and how that impacts the way she preaches and speaks in public spaces. John talking about visual sight loss and how that impacts him in terms of interactions and being at the front leading services and how people interact with him physically. We're looking at things like access to work, Church Buildings Council advice on making church buildings more accessible and the relationship with heritage. And also things like what it means for people to be disenfranchised from church. How do we get people who are disabled, who have been hurt by church, back into that place of good relationship with the church community and more importantly with Jesus?
I believe events like this highlight the importance of not only disability but wholeness, because I think it's something about health, well-being and the wholeness of a person. And having an event like this brings me together with others who share that and how we can become better people in advancing the cause. One of the things I will take away is that self-affirmation about being who I am.
I co-wrote a book called At the Gates, Hearing Stories of Disabled Christians, and there with so many good and bad, and I think a chance to come together and share those stories and learn from one another is a really helpful way of thinking about how we do things and how we welcome people into our churches.
In my situation, there aren't many openly autistic people with a diagnosis that are in church leadership and ministry. So that can feel quite isolating, and so having a network, a community, developing friendships are absolutely vital, definitely, yeah.
Having that chance to hear each other's stories and be inspired and encouraged, because it's what Jesus told us to do. That is a simple answer to welcome all and to know that God's love is boundless. And when we try to narrow down and put limits on that love, our churches are poorer for it.
So I guess the main thing for me is that I'm often in a minority in terms of the way that I deeply connect with God in worship. So I'm not someone that sort of is visibly enthusiastic in my worship or noticeably outwardly lively, but for me it's finding God in the still small voice, in the words of worship, and the deep, profound, rich treasury of liturgy and the awe and the majesty and wonder of God. That's where I most deeply connect with God. And so for me there's been a journey of spiritual maturity in realising that that's not the case for the vast majority of people around me. And I used to find that really frustrating because I felt a bit like a mute statue when I was at certain conferences or in certain types of service. But now I've just sort of had to realise that as long as people are aware that I worship differently, and that's an equal but different style of worship, then I can sort of stay in my lane and connect with God as directly as possible without being distracted by different ways of worship around me that aren't me.
I think for me it's about learning about other commonalities where you're not on your own, and there's all across the country that similar things are happening, but coming together gives us that chance to share good practice, and some of the stuff that we've heard has been absolutely brilliant.
I think inclusion is really important for the church as a whole, because as someone said earlier today, we are all part of the body of Christ, and we can't work without all these different parts.
Jesus says that we are all his children, all his sheep. He's our shepherd, and that's got to include everybody, not just the few, no matter what the impairment is, no matter what the ability is, and we've all got things to offer, and I think we as a church have got to start seeing the person, not the impairment.
I think what I'll take away from this is the massive wealth of resources that are available. There's so much shared knowledge here, such a wide range of experiences, both of disability and from improving access. And I hope to bring that back to our diocese and take a look at ways we can start thinking about improving our own relationship with disability and with access and with inclusion.